weeks off, I'm very pleased to be joined, as usual, by the full cast of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Andreas Amantonopoulos is an expert in secure systems and decentralized networks.
Hey.
Stephanie Murphy is a scientist and syndicated radio host.
Oh, it's so good to be back. We had a little summer vacation, I guess. More like a working vacation, because we've all been very busy.
I just had a staycation and then had a bit of an argument with Gavin.
So we've actually been really busy, even though we haven't been necessarily on the air. Andreas, I know that you had a project that you've been working on for a couple of months.
Very delighted about this. Several months ago, I went out and proposed a book on Bitcoin to one of the best technical publishers out there, or in fact, the best. As of a few weeks ago, it became official. I now have a signed book contract with O'Reilly Media. And O'Reilly Media... Oh, thank you. O'Reilly Media is a technical publisher. Many technical documentation users will know them as the publishers of the Animal series. They make many great books for developers. Probably any self-respecting geek has a shelf or two of O'Reilly Animal books. I'm delighted to announce that I'm writing a book. It's going to be a rather long endeavor. As a result, I've pushed a lot of my other activities to the side. And for the next 6 months, I'm going to be focusing on the Bitcoin book.
The Bitcoin book. Does the Bitcoin book have a name?
Well, it's still preliminary because the title comes last. One thought was mastering Bitcoin. It's aimed primarily at people who will be doing development and need a technical understanding of Bitcoin, but it's meant to be approachable by all. By the way, you can check out the information about the book at bitcoinbook.info. You'll find also an outline of the book. It's still in draft, but we're inviting comment. I would love to hear from people who have ideas about how to address the book and what it should contain. Also, a little short survey there to see how we can address different audiences. And so for at least the next 6 months, I'm going to scale back some of my other activities and focus on the book primarily. Of course, the Let's Talk Bitcoin show. And then I hope to be doing some consulting gigs on the side to pay my bills while I'm getting this book out. So that's another thing I'd like to get out there.
Andreas, usually we give out my contact information. Is there contact information you'd like to give out for yourself?
Oh, sure. Andreas at letstalkbitcoin.com. The book can be found at bitcoinbook.info. Oh, one other, I think, exciting announcement is that if all goes well, the book itself will be released under a Creative Commons license.
That's cool.
Yes, and this is something that O'Reilly does occasionally, but not always. And I explicitly lobbied, if you like, for that. And that will make the book free to read and free to share for anyone.
In my spare time over the summer, we've been basically continuing and finishing the process of getting the new Let's Talk Bitcoin website to a point where we can launch it and it can do more than just be a Tumblr page that has the show posted to it. We've added a daily guest blog that I'm really excited about because we have some big names lined up to be writing some pieces for us, like a monthly column from Alan Reiner over at Armory Wallet, talking about the latest and greatest coming out of wallet applications. He's doing some really exciting work and is at the forefront of a lot of these technologies, like the fragmented backups, things like that. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of that. But just in general, the whole idea behind Let's Talk Bitcoin is to create a platform that smart people who have relevant and interesting and insightful things to say can have a place to in fact do that. Because a lot of people in this community are really smart, but there aren't that many places where you can actually have your voice be heard and have it be about the conversation. And so that's really what the focus is with the new website. We're releasing a new piece of content every day from generally a different author. And we're a week in, and so far it's going really well. And also I wanted to mention that I finally have help on the editorial side in a really meaningful capacity from a friend of mine named George Ettinger, who's joined as a contributing editor for now, and he's going to become the managing editor of the website. If you haven't checked out the new letstalkbitcoin.com, make sure that you do. We also have a new newsletter that we've just started up yesterday. First issue came out, called The Weekly Bitcoin. You can visit that at theweeklybitcoin.com. Basically, it's our top 7 stories, not just from Let's Talk Bitcoin, but the favorites of the editors. We curate and then comment, essentially, and then send it to you on Sunday mornings. There are lots of things coming out. I'll have more to talk about on this in a couple of weeks, but I'm very excited with the way things are going. We've gotten a great response.
I was not involved in the website. I just saw it like everybody else recently. Immediately put it in my daily reading bookmarks and now visit it daily to get, some superb content. Adam, congratulations. It's really great.
Thank you very much.
Me too. I echo that. I'm really excited It really matches the professional quality of what we're trying to do here with Let's Talk Bitcoin. And if people want to join the team and write for Let's Talk Bitcoin, do you have a way to do that?
Right now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build out maybe 60 different authors who we can work with on a regular basis. And you don't need to have experience to do this. You just really need to have something to say and a perspective that should be out there, but that isn't necessarily. One of the other things, I promise I'll get off this topic in just a second, but so we are run by tips and try to be run by tips. Right now, we're more run by sponsors than we are by tips. I wanted to take the opportunity with the website to try and push forward this idea that the people who consume the content, the people who read the articles or who listen to the shows, should be the ones who provide some sort of minimal payment for it. And the expectation isn't that everybody's going to do this. We're not talking about a paywall. We're talking about voluntary contributions from people who actually value the work. And so I was really excited because we had a piece from Mark Matthews that was released on, I believe it was Saturday's piece, that after 24 hours, he had received 11 tips totaling about 0.4 Bitcoin. So that's fantastic from my perspective because it means that people who write for Let's Talk Bitcoin, even though they're writing for me for free and I get the traffic onto the platform, it means that they actually still get compensated by somebody, and it doesn't necessarily have to come out of my side. Because usually when you're running a site like this, it's really a battle between, trying to pay people what they deserve to be paid or what they feel like they want to be paid or not paying them anything at all. There's never really been a middle ground. But with Bitcoin and these tip widgets, it really is allowing for that. And so every single article that's up there, and we published our 8th article today, has received at least 1 or 2 tips. And that, to me is really, really exciting. I also usually toss in a tip, but they're receiving tips from people who aren't me too. So, again, the model could work, especially as we grow the audience. So, Stephanie, are you still doing pork therapy? What's going on with that?
I guess we should back up the train. I'm on Let's Talk Bitcoin, but I'm also a part of 2 other podcasts. One is Free Talk Live. It's a podcast and a syndicated radio show, and I'm still doing that. And the other one is Pork Therapy, which used to be a live radio show, but I've changed it to podcast only. And I've been traveling a lot this summer, so that's going to be relaunching soon. All new podcast only content. So I'm really excited about that. But another thing I've been working on, getting up a website for my voiceover services. And if you've heard this show before, you've probably noticed occasionally we'll drop it in there that I make audiobooks, video narrations, short commercials, even things like phone greetings, or recently I got an offer to do an ASMR job, which is basically like people like to listen to these sound effects that kind of give them chills and help them fall asleep. Very interesting voiceover job. But anyway, so I do freelance voiceover work of all different kinds, and I've put up a website. It's called smvoice.info, so you can find my voiceover work at smvoice.info.
Well, now that we've caught up with everybody's life outside of the show, let's jump right into our first topic. Since we've been out, I think that the network hash rate has just about doubled in the last month. Is that right? I know it's at least gone up 100 terahash.
Yeah, that's about right.
That number by itself sounds like, 100 terahashes. That's great. Well, what's a terahash? But in the context of mining, compared to where we were even 6 months ago, the whole network was less than 50 terahash, and now we're over 400 terahash. So remember,
excuse me, 539. It went up another 100 since last week.
Oh man, this is exactly what's happening here, is that as these ASICs are coming out, the amount of power that's going into the network is just exploding. And so people who even 2 months ago had a pretty good chunk of network hashing power suddenly are finding themselves with not much network hashing power at all. I don't know if it's not profitable yet for people who are buying this equipment, but for people who are still waiting on pre-orders from Butterfly Labs, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine how painful this has got to be.
I mean, it really does seem like it's just going to be kind of a treadmill, an arms race to get the most out of your mining equipment and get your mining equipment as fast as possible before it inevitably becomes obsoleted in a couple months or weeks, In September, apparently, KNC Miner is going to start shipping their units, and there's going to be even more hashing power coming online. And they're anticipating in another 3 months after that there's going to be even more coming online because they're going to be releasing more powerful devices, and so are some other companies. So it seems like the sky's the limit at this point. It's going up really fast. I just pulled up some graphs of the total network hashing rate on the Bitcoin network, and I mean, it's going
vertical,
parabolic. Yeah. Yeah, I think this leads into something that I've been hearing a lot about recently in the Bitcoin world. people are really skeptical whether mining is going to be a profit center long term. You know, like how can this possibly keep up? It's just there's so much effort and so much money and so much hardware, so much brain power and talent going into making more powerful mining devices, ASICs. When is it going to stop? You know, is there ever going to be a point where people are really going to make back their returns and it's really going to be worth it to mine? People must think so because they are investing in mining equipment, but is that view correct? And we just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with the difficulty. And the other wild card, we don't know what's going to happen with the price of Bitcoin. If you're looking to make back your investment in mining hardware by selling off the Bitcoins, is it only going to be worth it if you hold on to those Bitcoins until they're worth $1,000 a pop? Maybe. And will they ever get there? Maybe. We don't know.
We do know some things. What we do know is that the difficulty will essentially balance out at difficulty level that is profitable for the majority of Bitcoin miners. And we know that because the difficulty level depends on the previous 2100 blocks hash rate. And therefore, if it's not profitable, then miners leave, and they keep leaving until it is profitable for more miners that are joining than miners that are leaving. And therefore, by definition, the difficulty will always reach an equilibrium level where it is profitable, at least for some miners, otherwise it would decrease. However, who are these miners, right? So the profitable for some miners may actually end up meaning it's profitable only for a tiny percentage of miners who have the very latest ASICs and the very cheapest electricity. For many of the people who have bought ASICs and don't have as cheap electricity, it's very difficult to break even or make a profit over the medium term. Does that make sense, though, that the difficulty adjusting means that it will always be profitable?
That does make sense to me. But I also kind of wonder, like, if people are anticipating it will be profitable and then their expectation is not met. Like, I think that probably happens quite a bit, that there are more people who believe that they can make a profit at mining. And then once they try it, they can't. And so then they'll drop out or whatever.
So the question there would be, they're anticipating it will be profitable with the rig they own at the time. and that's the part of the assumption that doesn't quite work out. Sure, it's going to be profitable for someone, but not this rig, not you, buddy.
If the network is constantly moving towards an equilibrium, right, like any market, and it really is like a market force that's doing this, then it's going to be profitable for some people, but barely profitable, right? Most people, it's going to be barely profitable or barely unprofitable, right?
I believe that's the definition of a healthy market. If it's vastly profitable for quite a few people, then that market should attract entrants to the point where it once again stabilizes at barely profitable. In fact, the idea that financial services should be anything more than barely profitable is a modern invention. It requires a lot of rent-seeking and bot politicians to achieve.
Right. So that would come from a distorted market, which
Absolutely.
the Bitcoin mining is a free market or a freer market, right? And so there hopefully aren't as many of those distortions in there that are going to make it hugely profitable for some people and not for the rest. That's really interesting.
There will exist very large internal differences in profitability based on exactly when you bought your mining gear and exactly which mining gear you bought. So on the aggregate, it's a perfect market. On the individual basis, it can be a rather painful market, though.
I think that if we were talking about a normal market, then you might be right. But I do not think that mining can be considered an efficient market simply because so many people are buying hardware in advance without knowing what it's going to be like. For example, under your scenario where people turn off their mining hardware when it's not profitable to keep it on, that would work, except if I ordered my mining hardware 6 months ago and I just got it now. Then I have the choice of either completely not using my mining hardware whatsoever because it's not profitable, or turning it on because, hey, I bought it 6 months ago. What the hell else am I supposed to do with it? So again, if we were talking about a market where people placed orders and were ordering mining equipment based on projected profitability over the next couple of weeks, then yeah, you're right. It would have the ability to react to these changes. But I think that what we're going to find is that because so many people made this decision that they want to mine and they were going to invest in mining far in advance of ever receiving their equipment, that will not play out. I would be shocked if that played out.
So there's one major inefficiency, which is the uncertainty, significant uncertainty in ordering and receiving your mining equipment. Then there's a second inefficiency, which is the delay that's caused by the 2100 block recalculation, because it takes 2 weeks for the network to adjust to a changing of the hashing capacity. And so therefore, if something happened today, it would take 2 weeks for the network to adjust. So there's a bit of a lag there. And that obviously leads to market inefficiency because it leads to overcorrection, undercorrection effects. Just like if you had a lag in your steering or, you're going to end up zigzagging all over the road. It's the same thing here. And the third one is the inefficiency of the price because you have volatility, right? Which has almost become an obsolete topic. We don't talk about volatility because Bitcoin has been $100 for almost 5 months now. We still remember the days when, Bitcoin was changing 30% a day. Those three inefficiencies, when you add them together, make for a very interesting and exciting market with very, very high risk. But it is an efficient market. It's just not a perfect market. You're right.
I've been talking with a listener who has 1.4 terahashes on order from March from, I believe it's Butterfly Labs, but I'm not exactly sure if that's the manufacturer. Regardless, it's a large amount of hashing power and he made a large investment in order to get it. And he's just been pulling out his hair.
What's the conversion ratio of terahashes in bush versus terahashes in hand, though?
Yeah, right, exactly. The investment, I think, was somewhere in the range of probably $10,000 to $20,000 to get there.
Yeah, 20,000 sounds on the low end for
right, exactly. Well, that's the thing is it has been getting cheaper over time. That's definitely true. So it's kind of been interesting to watch this. But the point is that, people who even have already bought hardware, I think especially people who have already bought hardware, are looking at the mining situation now and looking at how fast this thing is expanding and how it looks like it could even get worse. And this is all, of course, happening without the price increasing. Because, Stephanie, like you mentioned earlier, if the price was increasing along with it, then we'd be having a completely different conversation here. And it wouldn't be about how efficient mining is, relatively speaking, because if the price keeps up with the increases in difficulty, then it almost doesn't matter if you're getting, 0.1 of a Bitcoin for $100 or 1 Bitcoin for $100. It's just how does the math happen to work out for your particular equation? So what we've seen is a couple of different approaches to this problem from the actual companies that are making this equipment or that want to be in mining. One of the common approaches that we've seen, and I say common, although I don't think it actually exists yet, but what we've started seeing a lot of is this idea of cloud-based mining, where you don't own the hardware, you don't run the hardware. Instead, you invest, you buy a fixed amount of hashing power or you buy a fixed amount of time on these mining rigs, and then you can take the profit from it without having any of the operating cost. And they take off usually, I think I've seen between 6% and 10% in terms of management fees. But beyond that, it's usually a one-time purchase. Do you guys think that this is a better way to mine than trying to invest into hardware, trying to instead find some fixed position essentially to invest in and then have it generate almost a dividend-like return? Or do you think that has the same problems that mining does?
It solves some different problems than mining. I think it's one of a spectrum of services you're going to see. So ownership in mining gear, like ownership in servers, is going to occupy the spectrum from fully owned, where you buy the mining gear and you own it in your own location, to co-located, where you buy it and you put it in a data center that has cheap electricity and obviously some special requirements for mining. You could have hosted mining where they provide the mining equipment and you rent it by the hour, or you could even have cloud mining. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have entities like ASIC Miner, which essentially abstract the entire thing behind share ownership, and you just get a dividend. Where you pick your entry point in mining in this spectrum really is a matter of how much you want to abstract your profit from the actual source, which is the mining function. If you want to abstract it all the way, essentially you can just go out and buy $20,000 worth of Bitcoin. Wait for mining to trickle into the price of Bitcoin. And some people do that.
Yeah, it's really interesting that now there's such a wide variety of options for people who want to somehow get into this world and participate in whatever, mining Bitcoins or creating the Bitcoin network or just investing in Bitcoins. Is investing in mining equipment going to be more profitable or make more sense for that particular individual than it would be to just buy Bitcoins? And that's a really interesting question. Maybe the answer is different for different people.
It's different for different people, as well as different geographies based on the availability of electricity. It depends on their skill set and how much they want to use their own skills to gain an advantage of the market. If you're really a hardware geek, then you can probably squeeze out some more efficiencies out of a mining rig than someone who isn't. So, for some people, it's better to get right down in there in the hardware, and some will abstract it away into a data center in the cloud. Very similar to how people own servers.
I'm still waiting for the solar powered ASIC to come out.
You're listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin, the premier audiocast providing news and insights that cover the rapidly evolving world of digital money. Our twice-weekly show include analysis of late-breaking news, updates on key technical, business, and regulatory issues, and in-depth interviews with the key people driving the new digital economy. Let's Talk Bitcoin offers sponsors an attractive way to reach a targeted and savvy audience. For more information, email sponsors at letstalkbitcoin.com.
More than 300,000 users and counting trust blockchain.info. It's a Bitcoin wallet service and a wealth of Bitcoin information, and it's completely free to use. With a blockchain.info wallet, you'll get the convenience of a web wallet and the security of a desktop client. Blockchain.info is also a block explorer. You can use it to see Bitcoin transactions in real time, check the balance of any Bitcoin address, and view many handy Bitcoin charts, all for free. See what they have to offer today at blockchain.info.
So there is another option that we've recently seen pop up. You know, we talked in the past about KNC's miner protection statement. We kind of made a joke about it and then found out that they were actually very serious, that, you know, they were going to have these 3-month development cycles that they would coordinate between various ASIC manufacturers, and all the ASIC manufacturers who are participating would develop for 3 months and then ship product for 3 months, and then develop for 3 months and ship product for 3 months, in an attempt to not be constantly flooding the market with so much hashing power that people who have just bought the newest hardware are being crowded out because so many people are in. The cloud mining is one way to go, but another way that we've seen people go now, a company called hashfast.com, which supposedly has some muscle behind it and some funding behind it, is selling pre-orders on a unit called the Baby Jet for $2.80 per gigahash. It's a 400 gigahash unit, costs about $5,600. They're planning on shipping these in September or October. But the thing of it is that with how fast the network is growing, spending $5,000 on a mining rig, well, you know, that might not wind up being worth your time if the network continues to grow at exponential rates. So what they've done is they've put together their own miner protection program. And it says this: at HashFast, we understand that healthy, prosperous customers make for a healthy and prosperous company. We know that our customers are concerned about the rapid growth of the network hash rate, and we stand by our customers. We designed our silicon so efficiently per square millimeter. So anyways, if the Bitcoin network hash rate increases so that your Baby Jet doesn't generate more Bitcoins in 90 days than you paid for it, HashFast will give you additional ASICs. In fact, we will give you up to 400% more hashing capacity than the Baby Jet you purchased. Yes, that does mean if you don't make your money back in 90 days, we will increase your mining capacity up to 2 terahashes. And so basically the way that this works is that after 90 days, if you haven't made your Bitcoins back, then they send you enough equipment so that you will make your Bitcoins back and you get to keep all of the equipment. That's definitely another way to go about it, but that seems to imply that the cost of the equipment actually doesn't matter much at all. I mean, right? You
mean to the manufacturer?
I mean to the manufacturer, yeah. I mean, if they're selling these units for $5,600, then that, you know, and they're willing to give you four additional units if that first unit doesn't do the job for no additional cost.
The cost of fabricating an ASIC is all in the setup. Once you get it out, the units really end up costing about as much as an equivalent sized potato chip.
That's the way they call it a wafer.
Exactly. You had these situations, I don't know if you remember, about a decade ago, Intel was selling chips where they had, you know, 3 different versions of the chips. And it was the exact same chip. And it had parts of the circuitry blown up on the smaller versions, so they wouldn't work. So, you know,
I do remember this, yeah.
They zapped out the cache, and then they zapped out half the bus or whatever. So they basically made it slower on purpose because it cost less to mess with the chip afterwards than to try and make a new one. I absolutely don't think it's an issue. You know, acquiring customers, acquiring fabrication facilities, then actually giving your customers extra chips really doesn't make any difference in cost.
So this is why we've seen Butterfly Labs do a similar thing, except for them, it was a whole bunch of little chips and they gave like a serious discount on it or something like that. They had kind of a complicated system.
I think it's really smart because essentially what it's saying is this is a way for a company to make a clearance sale sound like a customer advantage. What they're saying is if we fail in our predictions for the hashing rate and we have to increase it by 400%, at that point we have all of this old stock we need to get rid of that nobody's going to buy because it's 400% less than what it should be. So let's make an agreement to make it look like a great idea when we offload it all onto our existing customers. Okay, I'm being a bit cynical, but the point is, this is also one way for a customer to get some guarantee, but it's also a way for a company to hedge their bets on inventory, because from their perspective, taking a bet on future hash rate is just as dangerous as it is for the customer.
Well, those bets we've seen, they're really all over the place. So one of the cloud manufacturers that I spoke to is anticipating a 60% increase month on month of hashing power over the next 2 years. And the other one that I talked to actually said that they're using the 100% number, that it's going to be, the hashing power will double every month for the next 2 years in order to project out what people will earn from their service. So, I mean, those numbers are crazy. They're even crazier than what we're actually seeing now in practice. So I really have no idea what the landscape is going to look like in even 6 months.
Yeah, if they didn't think it made sense for them, they wouldn't do it. You know, so somebody thinks that that's a good idea and that'll make sense, and time will tell. I do think that a lot of people really do want that certainty, though. Like, they want that guarantee, like, yes, this is going to be profitable for me, or at least they want some assurance of that. And so I predict this is probably going to be a big seller, and maybe some other companies will get into offering the same thing as well.
Over the long run, I think the general idea that if you buy a mining rig on your own, you're exposed to 100% of the risk. Just like if you're mining on your own, you're exposed to 100% of the risk of not finding anything. If you buy into a cloud of mining rigs or stock-based ownership of a mining corporation or hosted-based mining rig, essentially what you're doing is you're pooling the risk of failure with the other customers of that company so that you don't spend as much money up front, you don't get as much reward down the road, but you reduce your risk overall. I think that's a great model. It allows people to choose the level of risk they want to take, chew it off and try to enter this mining game. At the most risk, buy their own mining rig and take a big gamble. At the least, maybe buy some shares or just buy some Bitcoin.
This doesn't work out, then these mining companies can always ask for a government bailout, right? Just kidding.
Just small enough to fail.
Andreas, I did have one more question for you. In the past, when we've talked about ASICs and how fast things are progressing, a lot of this is because the chip sizes are getting smaller. And this is actually not the chip size. It's the process size, right? When we talk about nanometers, we're not actually talking about really, really tiny chips. We're talking about that's almost the resolution of the process that they use to make them. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So with that in mind, in the past, you've said that there is no lower limit to how small these things can get. Is that really true? Can they actually get smaller than, 14 nanometer, than 10 nanometer? I mean, it seems like there has to be a practical limit.
People have been predicting the practical limit to Moore's Law for 30 years now, 40 years, and it basically hasn't arrived. If you're in this industry, you keep watching every 6 months for the article that predicts the end of physics in terms of being able to double the bandwidth, the data storage, or the compute capacity, and it never works out because in the meantime, someone figures out a way to make it faster. If it's not silicon, it's going to be graphene. And that's another exciting one where you have an almost 100x increase in the frequencies that you can put through. So you can operate things at 400 gigahertz instead of 1 gigahertz. You can also put through a lot less power and get the same computing capacity. Really, there's two efficiency curves you have to think of. The first one is the efficiency of computing a SHA-256. And if you do it on your own computer, that's not going to be very efficient. Let's say, for example, you write a Python 256 SHA. I did that. I was getting 100 kilohashes per second. Right? That's about as slow as it can get. And then from there, if you keep optimizing that, you're going to get to a point where you're implementing SHA-256 about as efficiently as you are converting electricity to heat. Does that make sense? For that specific size of circuit. So at 20 nanometers, you do your SHA-256 as efficiently as you can get. At that point, you can't get any more efficient on SHA without either making the circuit smaller or increasing the use of electricity. So you're done, right? And then you just wait until the next generation of fabrication comes out and you put it on a smaller circuit or on a graphene circuit, or you use lasers, or who the hell knows what's going to be next. So you can then increase that efficiency. We're seeing two things. We're seeing an explosion of hashing capacity primarily because we're moving on the first efficiency curve from computing on CPU to getting as close as possible to just converting electricity into heat, the maximum efficiency. Once we squeeze out all of that, then in order to get to the next generation of efficiency, we have to change fabrication. You can't really make SHA any more optimized at some point.
So there are practical limits. It's just that each practical limit applies to the specific process size. So like 28 nanometer has a practical limit, but it's a different practical limit than 24 nanometer.
When you get to the smaller fabrication size, you almost double the capacity. Essentially, we're operating on Bitcoin's law, if you like, or Satoshi's law, which is we're doubling the terahashing power every 4 weeks, it seems. That's the transition to getting as close as possible to the efficiency of the current silicon. Once we wring that out, then we're down to Moore's law, because the silicon itself operates with Moore's law. So we're not going to go faster than Moore's law. We're going faster than Moore's law now because we're catching up right down to the silicon. Once we get there, and it's all ASICs, you can't really make it faster unless you go to a smaller fabrication process.
I was thinking about this, and it seems like there is an inefficiency in Moore's law, because with Moore's law, you go through these sort of, the development cycle is the development cycle, but at the end of it, you have a chip that essentially nobody can use yet efficiently because the software hasn't been designed yet or hasn't been improved yet to be able to take advantage of these greater speeds in a lot of circumstances. But with Bitcoin mining, that's actually not present at all because we're only doing this one algorithm for mining. It's already as efficient as it can be. So it means that as fast as you can pump out new generations of hardware, you can also use those without having that development latency where the software has to catch up to the hardware.
I think what you're hinting at, the software for mining is what we'd call highly parallelizable in computer science terms, in that you can take the same problem and you can break it up either between multiple miners, or you can break it up between multiple cores on a CPU, or between multiple SHA engines on a chip. So to become more efficient, you just start sticking more SHA engines. Now, the mining problem is such that you can break it into 1 billion little SHA engines or 100 billion little SHA engines, and each can do meaningful contribution. Your email application or your web browsing, if you had, instead of 4 processors on your laptop, you had 150 processors on your laptop, it takes a lot of smart programming to make your web browser more efficient by splitting it into 150 processors. Whereas with mining, it's trivial to do that. So I think that's what you're hinting at, is that more and more cores, whether those are general processing cores or SHA-256 mining cores, works well for SHA, doesn't work well for general desktop computing. So you see much more efficient use of the processor.
I just want to say this was a really interesting physics lesson.
In the past several weeks, we've been talking about ASIC efficiency and whether ASICs lead to unnecessary centralization or unwanted centralization, which has been a concern. First expressed by Dan Kaminsky, who said that the proof-of-work algorithm would have to change before the end of the year, and that led to some interesting conversations here at Let's Talk Bitcoin. During those conversations, Gavin Andreessen, who is the lead developer and chief scientist of the Bitcoin Foundation, jumped in and objected to some of the statements I had made on the air and disagreed. So we invited him over for an interview, had a chat about how ASICs affect mining difficulty and whether they create a situation of unwanted centralization.
Hi, this is Jason King, founder at Sean's Outpost, and you are listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin. Sean's Outpost is a homeless outreach in Pensacola, Florida, and we are proudly powered by Bitcoin. To date, over 13,000 meals have been fed to the homeless in our area, all purchased with Bitcoin and through the generosity of the cryptocurrency community. Read more about us at seansoutpost.com. Food, shelter, Bitcoin, everybody. Sean'sOutpost.com.